Patty Williams had always insisted that she was better medicated, better balanced, better equipped to handle the world that had once seemed determined to push her over the edge. She told the doctors what they needed to hear. She told the review board that she understood the gravity of her past. She told anyone who would listen that Genoa City no longer haunted her dreams. But deep down, the city never stopped calling her name. Her release from the psychiatric facility had been celebrated as a victory of modern treatment and personal accountability. Patty had smiled sweetly when she stepped outside those locked doors, breathing in freedom as if it were perfume. She promised herself she would prove everyone right. And yet, when the opportunity for that reckless yacht escapade presented itself, she didn't hesitate. That should have been the first sign. Patty thrived on chaos the way others thrived on routine. The yacht drama had stirred something electric inside her, something she had worked very hard to convince others no longer existed. The danger, the secrecy, the proximity to Jack Abbott, it all awakened the old fantasies she had tried to bury under layers of therapy sessions and carefully prescribed pills. Jack Abbott had always been her weakness. To the rest of Genoa City, Jack was a titan of industry, a family man with flaws, a romantic who often found himself entangled in complicated love stories. To Patty, he was destiny interrupted, a love story derailed by outsiders who never understood the depth of their connection. Or so she believed. Now that she was technically a free woman again, Patty told herself she deserved closure, a real reunion, a proper conversation without locked doors or hospital staff hovering nearby. She convinced herself that one honest moment with Jack could reset everything. The problem was Diane Jenkins Abbott. Diane had clawed her way back into Jack's life more times than most people thought possible. She had a past littered with questionable decisions, manipulations, and reinventions. Patty saw that history not as a cautionary tale, but as proof that Diane was fundamentally unworthy. In Patty's mind, Diane's presence was the only thing standing between her and happiness. Jack, meanwhile, was fighting to salvage his marriage. The damage done between him and Diane ran deep, especially after the drugging incident that had shaken their foundation. Diane had struggled to accept Jack's explanation about the ecstasy in his system. Even if he insisted he had been set up, doubt lingered in her eyes. Patty watched all of it from a distance at first. She observed the tension in Jack's shoulders whenever Diane walked into a room. She noticed how Diane's voice hardened when she mentioned trust. Patty studied them the way a chess player studies opponents before making a decisive move. If she was going to win, she needed patience. Returning to Genoa City was easier than Patty expected. Familiar streets greeted her like old friends. The Abbott mansion stood as stately as ever, its polished exterior masking the fractures inside. Every corner of that town carried memories, some romantic, some violent. Especially violent. Longtime residents had not forgotten that Patty had shot Jack more than once. The sound of the gunshots still echoed in the town's collective memory, but Patty had convinced herself those moments were born from desperation, from emotional storms she could no longer control. She was different now. Or at least that was the story she rehearsed. The first time she saw Jack after her return, it nearly stole her breath. He looked older, yes, but also stronger somehow. Experience had etched itself into his features. Pain had shaped him, refined him. He was magnificent. Jack's initial reaction to seeing Patty was cautious politeness. He masked his discomfort with civility, asking about her health, her treatment, her progress. He kept physical distance between them, a subtle but unmistakable barrier. Patty interpreted it as lingering fear mixed with unresolved passion. She chose not to acknowledge the fear. Diane's reaction was far less restrained. The moment Diane learned Patty was back in town, alarm bells went off. She remembered all too well the havoc Patty had unleashed in the past, the obsession, the delusions, the violence. Diane made it clear she would not allow Patty anywhere near her husband. That only fueled Patty's resolve. In quiet moments alone, Patty replayed every slight she had ever endured. She remembered the way people whispered about her instability. She remembered being dismissed as dangerous, unpredictable, unworthy of love. And she remembered how Jack had once looked at her with something close to tenderness before everything spiraled out of control. She told herself that look had been real. As tension between Jack and Diane continued to simmer, Patty saw opportunity. Diane's pride was formidable, but so was her insecurity. The drugging incident had left cracks in her trust, no matter how much she tried to plaster over them. Patty began planting subtle seeds. A casual comment here, a carefully timed encounter there. She never pushed too hard. She simply reminded Diane of her own past mistakes, her own betrayals, her own deceptions. She framed it as concern, as understanding between two women who had both made regrettable choices. But beneath the surface, Patty was calculating. If Diane could be made to doubt Jack just a little more, perhaps she would walk away on her own. That would be far cleaner than any dramatic confrontation. Jack, for his part, was exhausted. He loved Diane, that much was clear even to Patty, though she hated admitting it, but love did not erase frustration. Jack was tired of defending himself, tired of feeling judged for something he hadn't intentionally done, tired of constantly revisiting Diane's own complicated past whenever trust became a topic of conversation. Patty positioned herself as a sympathetic ear. She spoke softly, gently, presenting herself as someone who understood being misunderstood. She reminded Jack that she had done terrible things in her past, yet she had fought for redemption. She suggested that perhaps he deserved someone who believed in him without hesitation. It was a dangerous strategy, walking that thin line between support and manipulation. But Patty had always excelled at emotional maneuvering. Still, something unsettled her. There were moments, brief flashes, when she caught herself staring too long at Diane, imagining what it would take to permanently remove her from the equation. Those thoughts came uninvited but lingered longer each time. Patty would shake her head, scolding herself. Violence would only land her back behind locked doors. She had worked too hard for her freedom. She needed a smarter plan. Meanwhile, Diane began to sense the undercurrent. She saw the way Patty's eyes followed Jack across a room. She heard the false sweetness layered into Patty's compliments. She knew obsession when she saw it. Diane confronted Jack about it one evening, her voice tight with frustration. He dismissed it at first, insisting that Patty was trying to move forward with her life. He didn't want to believe she posed a real threat anymore. After everything she had endured, surely she wouldn't risk returning to that dark place. But even as he defended her, unease crept into his thoughts. Memories of gunshots were not easily erased. Patty, watching from the sidelines, realized time was not on her side. If Diane and Jack managed to repair their marriage completely, her window would close. She needed something decisive, something that would shift the balance irrevocably. Yet every path she considered carried risk. If she directly attacked Diane's reputation, it could backfire. If she tried to frame Diane for something, she would draw suspicion onto herself. If she confronted Diane openly, it might strengthen the bond between husband and wife rather than weaken it. The more Patty plotted, the more her thoughts began to spiral. Sleep eluded her, her mind raced through scenarios late into the night. She imagined Diane leaving town in disgrace. She imagined Jack turning to her in gratitude. She imagined a wedding, a future, a life finally aligned with destiny. Then darker images intruded. A flash of a gun. The smell of smoke. Jack falling. Patty would jolt awake, heart pounding, unsure whether the vision terrified her or thrilled her. She told herself she would never go that far again. But obsession has a way of rewriting promises. One afternoon, as Patty stood across the street from the Abbott mansion, watching lights flicker on inside, a realization settled over her like a shadow. Diane was not simply an obstacle. Diane was proof that Jack would always gravitate toward women with complicated histories. Women who needed saving. Women who brought chaos. In Patty's mind, that meant she still had a chance. All she had to do was remind Jack who she truly was, not the caricature painted by tabloids and court transcripts, but the passionate woman who loved him fiercely enough to risk everything. The question was whether everything might once again include his life. As clouds gathered over Genoa City that evening, mirroring the storm building in Patty's thoughts, one thing became painfully clear: her rehabilitation was hanging by a thread. The careful balance she had maintained since her release was beginning to tilt. And if it snapped, there would be no halfway measures this time. Only consequences. The storm broke over Genoa City just after midnight. Rain lashed against windows and rattled gutters, the kind of relentless downpour that blurred streetlights and swallowed sound. Patty Williams stood at her apartment window, watching the sheets of rain streak down the glass, her reflection wavering in the darkness. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The calm, rational voice her doctors had worked so hard to strengthen was growing fainter by the day. In its place rose something older, sharper, more insistent. It whispered that she had waited long enough, that patience had earned her nothing but scraps of Jack Abbott's attention. Across town, Jack sat alone in the Abbott living room, the lights dim, a glass of scotch untouched at his side. Diane Jenkins Abbott had retreated upstairs hours earlier after yet another tense conversation. The topic had been Patty again. Diane insisted Patty was manipulating him. Jack insisted Diane was overreacting. But the truth was far murkier. Jack didn't fully trust Patty, yet he couldn't deny the sincerity in her eyes when she spoke about redemption. He wanted to believe in second chances. He had built much of his life on the concept. Still, the past had teeth. He remembered the first time Patty had shot him, the shock, the disbelief, the searing pain. He remembered the second time too, and the cold realization that obsession could override love in terrifying ways. Upstairs, Diane lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She told herself she wasn't jealous, she wasn't threatened, she was cautious, realistic. Patty's history wasn't ancient lore, it was documented violence. And Diane knew better than most how quickly perception could shift in Genoa City. One wrong move, one dramatic incident, and everything could unravel. The next morning, the storm had passed, but tension lingered like humidity. Patty requested a private meeting with Jack. She framed it as closure, as a necessary step in her continued recovery. She assured him she respected his marriage and had no intention of causing trouble. Jack hesitated. Diane outright objected. But ultimately, Jack agreed on neutral ground, a public park in broad daylight. He told himself it was safer that way, controlled, transparent. Patty arrived early. She wore soft colors, her hair neatly styled, her expression composed. Anyone watching would see a woman determined to present her best self, but beneath the surface, her pulse thrummed with volatile energy. When Jack approached, she smiled. For a moment, it almost looked genuine. They sat on a bench overlooking a pond, ducks skimming across the water. Children's laughter drifted faintly from a nearby playground. The setting felt absurdly peaceful given the weight of their history. "I meant what I said," Patty began softly. "I'm not here to destroy anything." Jack studied her face carefully. "Then what are you here for, Patty?" She swallowed. "To understand, to accept reality. I need to hear it from you." "Hear what?" "That Diane is your future." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Jack exhaled slowly. "Diane and I have problems, but yes, she's my wife, I love her." There it was. Clear, direct, unambiguous. Something inside Patty cracked. She had imagined this moment countless times, but in her fantasies his answer always wavered. There was always a hint of doubt, a flicker of longing for her instead. Now there was none. Patty nodded mechanically. "I see." Jack softened his tone. "I care about you, Patty. I want you healthy, stable, happy, but not like that, not the way you want." The old voice surged. "Not like that. Not the way you want." It echoed in her skull, twisting, distorting. She felt heat creep up her spine, her fingers curling into her palms. But she forced a smile. "Thank you for being honest," she said. The conversation ended without raised voices, without threats, without visible cracks. Jack left believing he had handled it well. Patty remained seated long after he was gone. Her composure dissolved piece by piece. Healthy, stable, happy. The words felt like mockery. Later that evening, she found herself walking aimlessly through familiar streets, her thoughts racing. Every memory of Jack and Diane together felt like a personal affront. She replayed Jack's declaration of love again and again until it transformed into something sharper: betrayal. She had changed for him. She had endured treatment for him. She had fought the darkness for him. And he still chose Diane. By the time she reached her apartment, a new clarity had settled over her. If she couldn't have Jack's love, she would at least ensure he understood the depth of hers. Diane sensed the shift before she saw it. Patty began appearing unexpectedly at the athletic club outside Jabot near the Abbott mansion gates, always watching, always smiling faintly. Jack brushed it off at first, but even he couldn't ignore the intensity building in her gaze. One night, as Jack prepared to leave the office, he found Patty waiting in the parking garage. The concrete structure amplified every footstep, every breath. "Patty," he said carefully, keeping distance between them, "it's late." "I know," she replied, "I just needed to see you." Her voice trembled, but not with vulnerability, with barely restrained emotion. "This isn't appropriate," Jack said firmly. "You promised." "I tried," she whispered. "I really tried to accept it." Alarm flickered in his eyes. "Accept what?" "That she wins." The word wins echoed strangely in the empty garage. "This isn't a competition," Jack said. "It is to me." For a split second, Jack saw it, the old instability flaring to life. "Patty, go home," he urged, "please." She stepped closer instead. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising. "I gave up everything, I fixed myself, I became who you needed me to be. I never asked you to change for me." "That's the problem," she cried. Her hand disappeared into her purse. Time slowed. Jack's breath caught as metal glinted under fluorescent lights. The gun looked almost identical to the ones from years ago. "Patty," he said evenly, heart pounding, "think about what you're doing." Tears streamed down her face. "If I can't have your heart, maybe I can finally stop it." The words hung in the air like poison. In that suspended moment, Patty saw every possible future: sirens, courtrooms, padded walls. But she also saw Jack's unwavering love for Diane, a love that excluded her entirely. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Then hesitation. Jack didn't move, didn't lunge. He simply looked at her, not with fear alone, but with profound sadness. "Don't do this again," he said quietly. "Again?" The reminder of history shattered her illusion. She wasn't rewriting the past, she was repeating it. The gun trembled violently in her grip. A security guard's footsteps echoed faintly in the distance, alerted by raised voices. Patty's resolve fractured. With a broken sob, she fired. The shot ricocheted off concrete, missing Jack by inches. Chaos erupted. The security guard tackled her before she could fire again. The gun clattered across the floor. Jack staggered backward, heart hammering but unharmed. Sirens wailed within minutes. As officers restrained Patty, she didn't resist. Her expression had gone eerily calm. "I tried," she murmured. "I really did." Jack watched in stunned silence as she was led away in handcuffs. Diane arrived soon after, having been called by security. She rushed to Jack, relief flooding her face when she confirmed he wasn't hurt. For the first time in weeks, they held each other without tension. The threat had been real, tangible, immediate. In the days that followed, Patty's arrest dominated Genoa City headlines. The attempted shooting erased any lingering narrative of full rehabilitation. Psychological evaluations resumed. Court dates were scheduled. This time, there was little debate about her condition. The court ordered her recommitted to a secure psychiatric facility. Jack visited once before her transfer. He didn't know why, guilt perhaps, or closure. Patty sat behind reinforced glass, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked smaller somehow. "I never stopped loving you," she said softly. "I know," Jack replied, "but love shouldn't look like this." She nodded faintly, maybe in another life. He didn't answer. When he left, Patty watched the door close with a distant expression. The facility that received her was stricter, fewer privileges, tighter supervision. Doctors spoke in clinical tones about relapse, obsession cycles, untreated delusions. Patty listened politely. But inside, something had finally burned itself out. Back in Genoa City, Jack and Diane slowly rebuilt their stability. The near-tragedy forced perspective. Their arguments felt smaller compared to what could have been lost. Patty became a cautionary tale once more, a reminder that healing requires more than surface compliance. From time to time, whispers circulated about her progress. Some said she was responding well to treatment. Others claimed she remained fixated, her obsession merely dormant. But one truth remained undeniable. When Patty's rehabilitation crumbled, it did so spectacularly. And though Jack's life had been spared this time, the scars of repetition ran deep. In Genoa City, history rarely stays buried. And love, when twisted by obsession, can become the most dangerous weapon of all.